Avoidants aren't typically turned on by the things that work on most people. Physical attraction matters, but it's not what creates the intense pull that makes an avoidant actually want to pursue and keep someone around long-term. Lust is temporary and manageable for avoidants because it doesn't threaten their defenses or require vulnerability. But there are specific psychological turn-ons that hit avoidance harder than any physical attraction could because they bypass defensive patterns and speak directly to their core needs and fears. These psychological triggers create obsession, not just attraction. They make avoidants feel things they're usually too defended to access. They create the rare conditions where an avoidant's desire to get closer is stronger than their fear of vulnerability and intimacy. Understanding these psychological turn-ons gives you insight into what actually makes avoidants pursue, commit, and fight to keep someone rather than running at the first sign of real intimacy or emotional closeness. Here are the 5 psychological turn-ons that hit avoidance harder than lust and why each one is so powerful with this specific attachment style. Turn-on 1. Genuine unavailability without game playing. The first psychological turn-on that hits avoidance harder than lust is genuine unavailability. This isn't about playing hard to get or pretending to be busy to make them chase you. This is you actually being unavailable because your life is full, your time is valuable, and you have priorities that exist independent of them. You're not trying to make them chase you through strategic unavailability. You're simply living a life so fulfilling that access to you requires effort and intentionality. This authentic unavailability is magnetic to avoidance because it triggers their pursuit response while simultaneously making them feel safe from engulfment. Genuine unavailability works on avoidance because it removes the pressure they usually feel in dating dynamics. When someone is too available, too eager, too focused on them, it triggers the avoidant's fear of being needed and their worry about losing themselves in relationship. But when you're genuinely unavailable, when they have to work to see you, when your schedule doesn't revolve around them, the avoidance nervous system relaxes completely. They don't have to worry about you becoming dependent or demanding because you're clearly fine without them. This safety, paradoxically, makes them want to get closer rather than maintaining their usual distance. The unavailability also creates scarcity that makes avoidants value you more than they would if you were always accessible. Avoidants take available people for granted because availability feels like it will always be there waiting. But when you're unavailable, when time with you is limited and has to be planned around your actual life, the avoidant recognizes that access to you isn't guaranteed or automatic. Subscribe for insights into attachment psychology that reveal what actually creates attraction with different attachment styles. This scarcity makes every interaction more valuable, makes them think about you more between contacts, and creates the kind of longing that avoidants rarely feel because they're usually the ones creating distance rather than experiencing it from the other side. Turn-on 2. Emotional self-sufficiency and stability. The second psychological turn-on that devastates avoidance is emotional self-sufficiency. This is you being so grounded in yourself that their patterns don't destabilize you emotionally. When they withdraw, you're fine. When they're inconsistent, you don't spiral into anxiety. When they need space, you give it without making it mean something about your worth or their feelings for you. You have your own sources of emotional fulfillment that don't depend on them showing up consistently or validating you regularly. This stability is incredibly attractive to avoidants because it means they can have connection without the burden of being responsible for someone else's emotional state. Emotional self-sufficiency hits avoidants hard because it addresses their core fear about relationships. Avoidants learned early that expressing needs leads to being burdened by others' needs in return. They're terrified of being needed because it feels like drowning in responsibility for someone else's happiness. When you're emotionally self-sufficient, when you clearly have your own emotional regulation and don't need them to be okay, it removes this fear entirely. The avoidant can enjoy connection without the weight of feeling responsible for your well-being. And this freedom is intoxicating to someone who usually feels suffocated by others' emotional needs. Your emotional stability also creates safety for the avoidant to actually feel their own feelings without having to manage yours. When you're reactive, when their patterns trigger your anxiety or hurt, the avoidant has to manage your emotions on top of their own defensive reactions. But when you're stable, when you can handle their patterns without falling apart or making them about you, the avoidant has space to actually examine their own behavior and feelings. This space is where genuine connection becomes possible, and avoidants are deeply attracted to people who create this kind of environment through their own groundedness and self-regulation. Turn-On 3. Mysterious depth they can't fully access. The third psychological turn-on is having depth and layers that the avoidant can't fully access or understand completely. You're not an open book. You have thoughts, experiences, interests, and parts of yourself that remain somewhat mysterious even as you get closer. The avoidant feels like they're always discovering new things about you, that there's more to understand, that you're complex in ways that make you endlessly interesting. This mysterious depth creates obsession because avoidants are drawn to what they can't fully know or control, what remains just slightly out of reach. Mysterious depth works on avoidance because it reverses the usual dynamic in their relationships. Typically, avoidants are the mysterious ones in relationships, withholding information about their inner world while partners try to understand them. But when you're the mysterious one, when you're not oversharing or making yourself completely known too quickly, the avoidant becomes the pursuer trying to understand you. This role reversal is powerful because it shifts them from the defended position to the curious position, and curiosity is what opens avoidance to vulnerability they usually avoid. The depth also ensures the avoidant doesn't get bored, which is crucial for maintaining their interest long-term. Avoidants often lose interest once they feel they fully understand someone because the mystery that attracted them initially is gone. But when you maintain some level of mystery, when there are always new layers to discover, when you're evolving and growing in ways they have to keep learning about, the avoidant stays engaged. The relationship stays interesting because you remain somewhat unknowable, and this ongoing discovery is more compelling than any physical attraction could ever be. Turn-On 4. Boundaries that don't bend for emotional manipulation. The fourth psychological turn-on that hits avoidance intensely is having firm boundaries that you maintain regardless of their behavior or attempts to test them. When they withdraw, you don't chase desperately. When they breadcrumb, you don't accept minimal effort. When they're inconsistent, you communicate what you need and follow through with consequences if it doesn't change. Your boundaries aren't angry or punitive. They're just clear limits about what you will and won't accept, and you maintain them calmly even when the avoidant tests them repeatedly. This boundary setting is incredibly attractive because it shows strength and self-respect that avoidants deeply value even when they're initially resistant to the limits you're establishing. Firm boundaries work on avoidance because they create the structure avoidants secretly want but can't create for themselves. Avoidants test boundaries to see if you'll maintain them, not because they want you to cave, but because they want to know you're strong enough to hold your ground. When you maintain boundaries despite their patterns, you're proving you can handle them without being controlled by them. This strength is attractive because it suggests you won't lose yourself in the relationship, which addresses their engulfment fears. The boundaries also force the avoidant to show up better if they want to keep you. When you have standards and enforce them, the avoidant can't maintain access to you through minimal effort. They have to actually meet your needs, show up consistently, respect your limits. This requirement that they do better brings out a different side of avoidance. Many avoidants are capable of showing up properly, they just don't have to when partners accept poor treatment. Your boundaries create the conditions where the avoidant either steps up or loses you, and many choose to step up when the boundary is firm enough and the person is valuable enough. Turn-On 5. Indifference to their patterns without coldness. The fifth psychological turn-on is being genuinely indifferent to their avoidant patterns while still being warm toward them as a person. You notice when they withdraw, but you're not bothered by it. You see their inconsistency, but you don't take it personally. You recognize their emotional unavailability, but you don't make it mean you're not enough. You're warm, engaged, and present when you're together, but you're also completely unbothered by their patterns because you understand they're about the avoidance wounds, not about your worth. Why these psychological turn-ons work specifically on avoidance. These 5 psychological turn-ons work uniquely well on avoidance because they address the specific fears and needs created by avoidant attachment patterns. Avoidance fear engulfment, losing themselves in relationship, being needed too much, being controlled through emotional dependency. Each of these turn-ons proves that connection with you won't trigger those fears. Your unavailability proves you won't engulf them or demand all their time and energy. Your emotional self-sufficiency proves you won't need them excessively or make them responsible for your happiness. Your mysterious depth proves they won't lose interest because you'll always be evolving. Your boundaries prove you won't lose yourself or become dependent. Your indifference proves their patterns won't control you or make you chase desperately. These turn-ons also reverse the usual dynamic where avoidants are pursued and partners are pursuing. When you embody these qualities consistently, you become the one being pursued. The avoidant has to work for your time because you're unavailable. They have to pursue understanding you because you're mysterious and complex. They have to meet your standards because you have boundaries you enforce. They have to manage their patterns because you're indifferent to them and won't tolerate poor treatment. This reversal puts the avoidant in the vulnerable position of wanting something they have to work for, and this vulnerability is what creates real attraction rather than just surface-level interest or temporary lust. Additionally, these turn-ons work because they can't be faked long-term. Avoidants have highly sensitive detection systems for inauthenticity because they're constantly scanning for manipulation or neediness that would trigger their defenses. If you're pretending to be unavailable while secretly hoping they'll chase, they'll sense it eventually. If you're performing emotional stability while anxiously waiting for them to commit, they'll feel it beneath the surface. These qualities only work when they're genuine expressions of who you are, which means developing these traits isn't about attracting avoidance. It's about becoming secure in yourself, and secure people naturally embody these qualities without effort or strategy. How to embody these turn-ons authentically? Embodying these psychological turn-ons requires genuine personal development rather than strategy. You can't fake genuine unavailability. You have to actually build a life so full that you're not organizing it around someone else's availability. This means investing in your career, your friendships, your hobbies, your personal growth. You have to become someone who's inherently busy because your life has substance, not someone performing busy to seem valuable. The authenticity is what makes it work. Emotional self-sufficiency requires doing the work to heal your own attachment wounds and develop genuine emotional regulation. You have to build internal resources for managing anxiety, processing disappointment, self-soothing when triggered. You can't be stable in response to avoidant patterns if you haven't done your own work to become secure. This might mean therapy, it might mean reading and learning about attachment. It definitely means practicing self-awareness and developing the skills to manage your emotional state independent of others' behavior. Developing mysterious depth means actually having depth. Read books that challenge you. Pursue interests that fascinate you. Have experiences that shape you. Develop perspectives on things that matter. You can't be mysteriously deep if you don't have substance beneath the surface. The mystery comes from having so much going on internally that you can't possibly share it all, not from withholding deliberately. The depth comes from living a rich internal and external life that makes you genuinely complex and interesting. Maintaining boundaries requires knowing what you need and being willing to walk away if those needs aren't met. You can't hold boundaries you're not prepared to enforce. This means getting clear on your standards, communicating them clearly, and following through with consequences when they're violated. It also means being okay with losing people who can't meet your standards, which requires believing you deserve what you're asking for and trusting that the right people will meet you where you are. Being indifferent to patterns while warm requires both security and understanding. You have to be secure enough that others' behavior doesn't destabilize you. You also have to understand attachment enough to recognize that avoidant patterns aren't personal. This combination of security and knowledge allows you to see avoidant behavior clearly without taking it personally, which creates the indifference. The warmth comes from still valuing the person separate from their patterns, seeing their humanity beneath their defenses. What these turn-ons don't mean. It's important to understand what these psychological turn-ons don't mean to avoid misapplying them in harmful ways. Unavailability doesn't mean being rude, ignoring messages, or playing games. You're still responsive and respectful. You're just not dropping everything for someone who hasn't earned that priority in your life. Emotional self-sufficiency doesn't mean having no feelings or needs. You're still human with emotions and desires for connection. You just don't depend on any one person to meet those needs entirely. Mysterious depth doesn't mean being secretive or withholding information to manipulate interest. You're appropriately open and vulnerable when it serves connection. You just don't overshare or make yourself completely known before appropriate levels of trust and investment have developed. You reveal yourself gradually in ways that match the development of the relationship rather than dumping everything immediately. Boundaries don't mean being controlling or demanding. You're not trying to change the avoidant or force them to be different. You're simply clear about what you need from relationship and willing to walk away if those needs can't be met. The boundaries are about protecting yourself, not controlling others. Indifference to patterns doesn't mean not caring about the person or the relationship. You care deeply about the person, you just don't allow their defensive patterns to dictate your emotional state or worth. The ultimate power of these psychological turn-ons. The real power of these psychological turn-ons isn't that they help you attract and keep an avoidant. The power is that developing these qualities makes you the kind of person who doesn't need to attract avoidance. When you're genuinely unavailable, emotionally self-sufficient, mysteriously deep, boundaried, and secure enough to be indifferent to patterns, you become attractive to secure people too. You become someone who recognizes healthy love and doesn't settle for less. These qualities also protect you from getting too invested in avoidants who can't show up properly. Your unavailability means you're not waiting around for them. Your emotional stability means their patterns don't devastate you. Your boundaries mean you leave if they can't meet your needs. Your indifference means you don't take their behavior personally. You're positioned to engage with avoidance from a place of strength rather than need, which means you can walk away easily if the relationship doesn't serve you. The ultimate truth is that these psychological turn-ons work on avoidance, but they also filter avoidance. The avoidants who are capable of real relationship, who have some self-awareness, who are willing to work on their patterns, will respond to these qualities by stepping up and doing better. The avoidants who aren't capable, who are too defended, who aren't willing to grow, will either walk away or continue minimal patterns that your boundaries won't accept. Either outcome serves you because you either get an avoidant who's showing up properly, or you get clarity that allows you to move on to someone who can meet your needs without requiring these specific turn-ons to motivate them.